Welcome to the ResearchWorks podcast, broadcasting live from the Oceania Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Other Childhood Onset Disabilities Conference 2026 in the beautiful city of Hobart, Australia. Join Dr. Dana Poole and the ResearchWorks team as we bring you an exclusive series of interviews with visionary keynote speakers and leading presenters, captured right here amid the groundbreaking discussions and innovations shaping the future of disability research and care.
Welcome back, everyone. We're back for another conversation. We're here at Oceania Conference 2026. It's just starting to come on to lunchtime now, so we're seeing people mingling around. And during this lunchtime conversation, I have the wonderful Meredith Smith joining me. She has the PhD platform at this conference. So welcome and congratulations.
Thanks, Dana.
It's a pretty big deal, isn't it, when you go through the journey of doing a PhD. And I know that a lot of people in this room have done one, but when you've done one, you realize the enormity of it. And when you get to the other side of it, you realize how wonderful it is. And then to get given the honor of being on the PhD platform, which is given to 3 people for each conference. How does that make you feel?
I think it is, I think you're right. It is really lovely to be at the end of the PhD and to be able to see some of the implications, I guess, of what we've been working on from that. And then, obviously a great honour to be able to have the opportunity to present in this kind of setting and on the platform. And I think I'm presenting along with Meredith Smith, who also did work on pain assessment in children with cerebral palsy as her PhD.
Yes.
I think that's been, just that will be a real highlight. I think our projects kind of dovetailed together quite nicely. So yes, that's a real privilege.
I did see that. And because as I was preparing for this, I saw Nadine's name and I know Nadine well. Then I saw your name and then I was like, am I reading the same thing right here? And I'm like, it is on pain and in sleep. And it just shows how important this area actually is. So I'd love you to walk us through your PhD. Your abstract is beautifully written. Your PhD is just wonderful. And it really takes your reader on a journey of how you've developed what you have. I don't want to give anything away yet, but you can do that part. Oh my gosh, I'm going to give it away. But the title of your PhD is Tailoring Chronic Pain Assessment to Children and Young People with Cerebral Palsy. If people hadn't gathered already, we're talking about pain. How did this journey start for you? Why did you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I didn't think that I wanted to do a PhD. And
Funny how it works, isn't it?
I think that's most clinicians don't think they want to do a PhD. I'd done some clinical postgraduate study and Associate Professor Adrian Harvey had been overseeing that course that I was doing and at the time had sort of planted the seed of a PhD, which I had politely rejected. And then later on, I guess clinically, you find that there are things that we don't have good management strategies for. And I think pain was one of those things that came up again and again and again as it was being brought up as an issue, but there was no way to really unpack that more. And then what you actually do about that was obviously quite far off in terms of being able to manage that better.
Sure.
So I think that's probably where it came from. At the time when I started, Adrian had already started with some work in this field. And so this was kind of the next step, was looking at how we better assess pain for these children and young adults. And so I thought it sounded like a great opportunity. So that's how I ended up there. Yeah.
Another clinician moves into the research world, but that's so wonderful for it to evolve that way. And it's really funny, the number of people I've spoken to where that's what happens, like a seed is planted by someone, the first rejection happens. And then you go away and they know, you think about it because you're looking at your caseload and you know there's something going on and they must have a time to go, she'll be back. Okay, so tell us what you did first. So you did 4 studies, or you had 4 papers. How many papers did you publish in total? 5 papers. Yep. So what was the first study? What did you do to start off with?
Yeah, sure. So at the very start, I think we were looking to understand what assessment tools were out there that we could use to better understand pain and better assess pain. I think the real focus of my PhD was moving away from understanding how intense pain was and thinking more about the interference of pain with life. And that had really come through. We had a lived experience advisory group from the start of the project, and they sort of said, we don't care what our pain is out of 10. We just want people to understand the impact that it's having on life. So the very first study I did was actually thinking about how we understand the impact of pain on life, but for children and young people who don't have the capacity to self-report in any way. And so that was the focus of that one, looking at observational tools and proxy reported tools. But what really came from that study was that there's a whole group of children and young people who are lumped into this category of they can't provide self-report, when in actual fact they probably can.
Right.
And we're just not giving them the opportunity to do that with the way that we tend to administer our assessment tools.
That's a crucial point, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of our assessment tools were probably not, which is probably what's coming out from this, but we're tailoring for the individual to be able to report. And so, of course, we're probably not understanding the extent of how pain impacts someone's life, because it's often very proxy reported, wasn't it? I'm jumping the gun again, aren't I? In terms of what you found. So in terms of, before we get to the results of that first section, how prevalent is pain in our young people with cerebral palsy? Do we know what those numbers even look like or how it's described?
Yeah, so up to 75% of children and young people with cerebral palsy report ongoing pain at some point. So it might not be ongoing pain forever, but it's ongoing pain at some point. So it's a lot more prevalent in cerebral palsy than it is, say, in the general pediatric population, where it'd be more, say, 20%. Yeah.
That's a massive difference, isn't it? And it just highlights the importance of this area, because there's so many of these children and young people, in terms of their functioning, will be impacted by that, learning under those conditions, and we don't really understand it. So from your first study, what did you find as you started to look through what pain assessments were actually out there?
Yeah. So what we found was something that I think probably clinicians would not be surprised about, was that there's an assessment tool, the pediatric pain profile, which is quite well known, quite well used. That was the tool that was recommended from that systematic review, both in terms of the feasibility of using that, but also in terms of the properties that it has to be valid and reliable, and used in, I guess, clinical and research settings.
Right.
So we finished that study and thought, well, there's not really any other work to be done in terms of focusing on this group who can't provide self-reported information by any method.
Right.
And this is really children with very, very low levels of communication function. So even for people who are familiar with them, their communication is inconsistent and unclear. So it's not for children who are using or making different alternative communication consistently, or even just with their families. That's kind of a different group, but it's for those ones who, really the communication function is quite low, and it's usually in conjunction with quite severe intellectual disability.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that wrapped up study one.
Yes.
What did you move on to from there?
Yeah, so then I think the focus really shifted, as I mentioned before, to this group of children and young adults who have the capacity to provide self-reported information, but we don't really accommodate for them in the way our assessment tools are developed at the moment. So they tend to receive a proxy report, even though they might have the capacity to do so.
Right.
So that was kind of the next stage, was thinking about how can we modify some of these existing pain assessment tools so that we can get the self-reported information.
Okay. So what did you find from that? How did you carry that out in the first place, actually? It would be an interesting methodology.
Sure. So we did it in a couple of different stages. So we started with, we did some interviews and focus groups to look at, I guess, some of the tools that have been identified. So interestingly, as I mentioned, Meredith Smith, she also was looking at developing a core outcome set for pain assessment in cerebral palsy, sort of concurrently with the work that I was doing.
Right.
We both did an online survey, separate groups of participants, and we found the same thing in terms of the tools that were most highly rated by people with lived experience and clinicians. So we ended up with two assessment tools. Well, the first one was the modified brief pain inventory, which some of you might be familiar with. The brief pain inventory, it's quite widely used in adults, and the pain interference section of that tool had been modified 3 or 4 times already for use in different populations. So that was one of the ones that was identified. And the second tool that was identified was the Fear of Pain Questionnaire for Children, which is a short form. This is probably less well known, but it looks at pain-related fear and pain-related avoidance of activities. When we spoke to our advisory group, they sort of said this area of the impact of pain on emotional functioning is really under-assessed and under-investigated, and that's probably the most important area in terms of having self-report as well, because it's very difficult for parents. And they told us that when we did qualitative interviews and focus groups, very difficult for parents to know how their child feels about pain. They might be able to understand the impact that pain's having in terms of, they don't seem to be able to do dressing, or they don't seem to be able to do mobility particularly well when they're in pain. But understanding what their perception is of pain and how they feel about it, the parents have no idea.
Of course. Yeah. And why is that important? I mean, I think it seems really obvious, but I think it's worthwhile spelling out, because I know when I'm in pain, I want to describe it. I want someone to understand me. I don't want them just to know that I'm in pain. I need someone to be on my page a little bit. But from the perspective of someone with cerebral palsy, why is it even more important for them? Like, there must be more reasons.
Yeah, I think probably one of the primary reasons is that understanding someone's perception of pain in relation to fear, so how much they perhaps fear pain or how much they avoid movement because of their pain, is in the general population, that's a key treatment target. So targeting someone's understanding of pain, helping them to build confidence and to understand, I guess, more about how their body works, so that they have less of that fear that then perpetuates typically avoidance of movement. And so for our participants in this study and just the clinical population as a whole, for them to have an understanding of that and have some control over what that means for them, I think is really important. Yeah. And that's something that we don't provide at the moment in terms of clinical care. Yeah.
Okay, so you found those two. I mean, isn't it funny when we go through a review of your PhD, we're going through it really quickly, but all the work that was behind each one was like laboured and intensive, and here we are going, and then we found these ones. Understand. Okay, so from there you wanted to make some modifications, and you're working with clinicians and people with lived experience. Is that what happened from there for the next stage?
Yes.
Okay.
So, so we gathered a whole range of modification suggestions. We had lots of things around, using visuals. Could we think about reducing the response scale?
That's right.
Having, a 0 to 10 scale is very difficult for people to engage with. Can we do something that's simplified? There was changes to the actual content of some of the items just to make them more inclusive. So some of them were around, say, walking or running, and being able to reword that to what might be more relevant. Right. So we did all of that, but what we ended up with was a huge list of conflicting suggestions. We had parents who said, could you remove all of the colours from the scale because my child has a visual impairment, it's too challenging. We had other parents say, without the colours, we don't know how to, our child won't be able to engage with it. So we were So that, I guess that led us into, then we looked at it. We had a modified Delphi study to gain consensus on what changes were most important to make.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we knew that we wasn't going to be perfect for everyone.
Of course.
But we wanted to kind of produce
as many as possible. Yeah.
That would be useful for as many. Yeah.
Sure. And I see that you made some of these modifications to these scales.
Yes.
You mentioned talking mats in your PhD. What are talking mats?
Yeah, sure.
How are they used?
Yes. So this came up, I think we were it's quite simple to make changes in terms of the wording and adding some pictures and things.
Right.
What really came up when we were doing the interviews and focus groups as well, though, was that actually the way we administer our assessment tools, so typically we do it on a pen and paper questionnaire. We might do it via an online questionnaire, but it's typically text-based. That method of administration was not accessible for a lot of people. And so one of the suggestions that came from the earlier studies was to could we think about ways to administer these assessment tools that would be more inclusive? That was where Talking Mats came in. Talking Mats is a UK-based visual communication social enterprise. They have a real focus on promoting accessibility of communication, both for people with and without disability. They work across the lifespan, so they've got all the way from children through to older adults with dementia. They do a variety of different topics and concepts. So pain was something that they were very interested in. They tend to use it as just a tool for opening up communication. So, they've done some very interesting things in terms of advanced care planning for adults with dementia using these particular symbols. Wow. So it's a symbol communication method. They hadn't done anything like what we were proposing before in terms of having a structured assessment scale that would be standardized and then overlaid, because we then overlaid a scoring system into it so that we could still compare total scores. So they hadn't done that before, but they were very keen to be involved.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. So we were able to partner with them. We had some grant funding to be able to enable that process, and then they developed Talking Mats versions of the two assessment tools we were adapting.
That's incredible. Okay, so then it didn't stop there. You have another step now.
Yes.
Talk us through that one.
So we then obviously wanted to test whether what we'd done was working so far. So we did a pilot testing process. We had about 33 children and young people with cerebral palsy, had a range of abilities in terms of we had participants who had cognitive impairment. We had participants who used augmentative and alternative communication.
Wonderful.
And we also had the broad range of mobility levels represented. And we kind of went through using those tools and seeing whether or not they were actually working. And what we found was that they generally, across the board, were feasible to use and they were understood by that broad range of participant group, which was great.
Right. It's what you want to know.
What we want.
Yeah, that's right.
What we did find, though, is that in terms of how long it took for them to be done, so we found it was about 5 minutes of both of the tools in that group of children and young people, which is, it's not a long time. It's a long time when you think about if you were to give these 10 items to an adult to complete, it probably would take them less than 30 seconds.
Sure.
But what we found was that for our users who had used augmentative or alternative communication, it could take them up to 25 minutes, but they still really, really wanted to do it.
Right.
So I think that was just something that we took away from a clinical standpoint, is thinking about how do we actually, this might not be feasible to do in a clinic setting,
sure,
but these are people who really want to give their self-reported information. We need to make that possible.
Yeah.
What does that
How do we
look like?
facilitate this process?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So these tools now are available to be used.
Yes.
Tell us how we get a hold of it and how you hope for us to use it.
Yeah. Sure. So, so they're available on the Oceania Academy website. They're freely available to download. There's kind of two versions of each of the tools. There's everything on the one page. There's also one item per page, which maybe is useful for some people who find that a little bit easier. The Talking Mats versions are also freely available to download. The Talking Mats team just asked that anyone using them has undergone the foundation training for Talking Mats, which is actually, it's quite easy to access. It's online, asynchronous. It's quite low cost. I think it's about 250 Australian dollars as a once-off. Many clinicians that have been implementing this already were already trained in Talking Mats. But once you've kind of got that training, you can just declare that on the survey and you can access these tools free of charge as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So what would you like to see now? I mean, that's your PhD in a bit of a nutshell. But what a wonderful journey that has actually been in terms of the evolution of tools and to actually have a product in a way that's ready for people to use. Where to for this research and where to for you? I think they're two different questions sometimes. Sure. Yeah, let's go with that.
Sure. So I guess where to from this research? We've been quite fortunate that towards the end of my PhD, we got some funding to do a larger scale study using these tools in practice. That paper has just been submitted. So we looked at the impact of pain and particularly around the pain-related fear and activity avoidance in these children who I guess we haven't really heard from before. Right. So that was really pleasing. So we got some initial results there, which are not surprising really in terms of looking at, so say for people who have cognitive impairment, they have higher rates of pain-related fear. I think that's probably not surprising. If you can't understand what's going on for you, you may be more afraid of that. So I think that probably just highlights what I think the work that I hope that this PhD sort of pushes towards, which is assessing pain is great, but we need to manage pain better.
That's right.
And how are we going to do that? I mean, there are obviously existing services for chronic pain management at most tertiary hospitals, but they're typically not particularly accessible to people who have cognitive impairment or communication impairment or severe movement impairment. So I think how do we potentially leverage that, adapt those services so that they are, or do we need to think about other ways of providing that pain management through our existing paediatric rehab services? I think there's probably two arms to it. Yeah.
That's an important distinction. We were talking earlier about early detection and early intervention, right? So early detection, earlier than ever. Now the interventions need to also meet that point as well. With pain, when you get more information about pain and how it is perceived and how it's experienced, the interventions also need to follow, or the treatments need to follow as well, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our participants kept saying to us is they said it's really good to be able to be assessed and to be understood, but sometimes we feel like we do all of this assessment,
right?
And where does it go?
Yeah, what
actually changes? So I think that's probably the most important thing that we can think about. And there is some work that's started already. So Adrian Harvey got a NHMRC Ideas grant to look at co-designing pain education for children with cerebral palsy. So I think that's probably the first step in better understanding pain. I mean, that, typically in the general population, that's the first step in managing chronic pain, is to have a better understanding of that. So hopefully that will be kind of a step in the right direction and have some really interesting and accessible resources that can be used.
That's really wonderful to know. What about for you? Where to now? I mean, you've probably already embarked on it, right? As soon as you finish your PhD, you just go straight into it.
Yeah, you just keep doing more things.
I guess, what are you doing now?
Yeah. So I'm doing some work, as I mentioned, with Adrian's grant in terms of co-designing those pain education resources. So that's quite exciting to be involved in. Also doing some work at the moment with some people in Canada around embedding patient-reported outcome measures in their paediatric pain and paediatric rehabilitation services. So,
brilliant.
I think that would be interesting. They've obviously got a very different healthcare system to what we have here. So I'm looking forward to learning from them and to understanding more about how, they might address some of these issues.
That's wonderful, isn't it? Because it has to translate to different systems, because we know that the pain is still experienced, what we're going to do about it. And hopefully through just different systems, we can come up with something that will work with more people. Yeah. Well, how exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for walking us through all of that. And for embarking on the next phase so quickly. It's so funny, isn't it? You always think the PhD is like the pinnacle. You want to get to that point, and you get to that point and you go, there's more work to be done. And then off you go.
I know you want to have a rest, but it turns out it's not time to have a rest.
That's right. Yes, I know. We need to make sure. Do we tell people that ahead of time, or that scare them off? I'm not sure. But either way, it's a great journey. Well done. To all of our listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that. Remember to look at those links that Meredith referred to with regards to those assessments on the Oceania Academy website. They're free, and what an important way for us to have a greater understanding about pain in our young people's cerebral palsy. So we'll talk to you all again really soon, and more topics, more conversations. Bye.